Welcome back to Bleav in Softball. I'm your host, Jenna, and however you got here today, whether you downloaded the audio version on Apple, Spotify, etc., or you're watching video on YouTube, thank you. Welcome back. You can subscribe and rate the show wherever you get your podcasts as well. Follow us on Instagram and X at Bleav in Softball. That's BLEAV. And don't forget about the merch. You can click the link in our bio on either page or go to shop.bleav.com to purchase. There's 3 different shirts to check out. Would love to see what you guys think. All right, let's go through today's batting order. First, we'll be covering our bases. I'll share some call-outs. Then we'll head into today's interview with Morgan Stuart. She's a UW alum, and she's been in the development space for a long time now. And we even played against each other back in college. So it's going to be fun. And then we'll end things and bring it home while I wrap up with some final thoughts. All right, let's go. Covering our bases. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And Mary Nutter just ended. And there in person, I got to see a lot of wonderful softball. 4 days, 31 teams competing in the tournament. We did 20 plus interviews with players, coaches, pros, executives, etc. with the D1 softball team. Really proud of them and how hard we all worked. But I also loved the fact that I got to see a ton of Bleavers. I think I must have talked to a dozen or more past guests on this show. Of course, I told you all last week, Sachel Palacios was the guest correspondent working with me, so we had way too much fun. And there's a blooper reel for evidence too, if you've seen that on D1 Softball's social channels. And Charlize, her sister, hung out with us as well. So the fact that we had both of the sister Bleavers was really, really fun. Seeing Rachel Garcia, she was there with USA Softball, actually kind of inspired me to buy some new Oakley glasses, so you might see those this season. And then Dana Sorensen, she's obviously Stanford family, but also a GM in the AUSL. Sam Fisher and her dad, I've known her since our first travel ball team at like 11 years old. And then multiple coaches whose teams were competing in the tournament too. Larissa Anderson from Mizzou, Courtney Deifel, Chelsea Spencer from Cal, Tori Tyson from Howard, Utah's Amy Hogue, Victoria Hayward in her first year leading Nevada, Laura Berg, Jayla Wright, who's GAing for Tennessee. It just felt like the list went on and on. I also have to give a special shout out to lots of the SIDs that I've worked with over the years that I also got to see. It was so nice to see them. They're the real MVPs. And then even extensions of some Bleavers too, some families. So Grace Uribe from San Diego State, her grandparents were watching since she's from Southern California. And then friends of friends still had a presence, even if they weren't there physically. So the Range, the pitching academy in Southern California, led by Holly Pierce and Tony Rico, they were both on the show. Holly was my old travel ball coach. They had their rings from their system, their pitching system, at one of the booths. Got to go check it out. That was pretty cool. It just felt like everywhere I looked, there was a really cool tie-in to not only the softball community, but just my own community within softball as well. But the fun stuff too with the concessions, I'd have to say my favorite are the tacos. I think I got it at least 3 times, if not 4, in the 4 days that we were there. The ice cream was fantastic. Shaved ice, always fun when it's hot out. And, added a little tri-tip and popcorn in the mix too. But concessions are top tier. The booths, like I mentioned too, getting to actually hang out and walk around a little bit was nice. It had been a while. And seeing the autograph lines forming after games for these teams, win or lose, they were just so excited, these young girls in their team shirts or their uniforms, running up to get those autographs on their softballs. And so many people talked about how they remember as current college players or pros, they remember when they were those little girls. So getting to be on the other side was cool to witness. Also ran into one of the teams that I met last year, actually, and we got to take a picture with the Fly Queens. They also participate in the Compton Youth Academy, so getting to see them in person again was great. And just overall travel ball vibes. Probably because I'm from SoCal, but also having grown up playing at Big League Dreams, it just felt like nostalgic and very current at the same time with the college days that we're seeing right now and just my own experience. the D1 Softball Podcast. We talk a lot about Mary Nutter, and the new episode's out this week with my co-host Amanda Lorenz. We interviewed Duke pitcher, and it happens to be the D1 Softball National Pitcher of the Week and ACC Pitcher of the Week, Cassidy Curd, after the Blue Devils went 5-0 at Nutter. Great weekend for them out in California. So you can check that out on D1 Softball's YouTube or download it wherever you get your audio pods as well. Always welcome to do that too. Coming up, I am actually finally back home. So been all over the place, different time zones the past couple weekends during the preseason, but I'm actually back. I'll be calling women's gymnastics. There's a quad meet on Friday and a baseball doubleheader on Saturday at Stanford. But ACC softball starts. The conference slate is officially starting. It's one of the earliest conferences to do so. And I'll be watching that closely before calling the ACC home opener at Stanford next week when they host Syracuse. Plus, of course, as always, keeping an eye on softball across the country. But someone else who's deeply involved in our sport is today's guest. So let's head into the interview. She is an instructor, ambassador, all Pac-10 player, NCAA national champion, Washington Hall of Fame inductee, and former pro Morgan Stuart. Thank you for joining, Morgan. I'm excited.
Happy to be here.
I think actually we played against each other for, it had to be 3 years because you were the class of 2011, right?
Yes, done in 11.
Okay.
Yes.
I was 12 and I went back and I actually looked at the box score, I think.
Oh gosh.
From at least the series. I didn't look at the actual stats, don't get me wrong.
Okay, good.
But just the positions, because I wanted to say, I was like, I'm pretty sure we must have both played third base. And we did in that series. It was at Stanford. That was my junior year, your senior year. So we were both playing third for opposite teams. Yeah. Fun fact.
Fun fact for us. Congratulations for us.
But I loved playing third. And I know you love defense, which we're definitely going to get into a little bit more. But what did you like about third base?
What I liked is I was so pleasantly surprised because growing up a shortstop, I had like that shortstop pride, right? You're the best fielder on the team, you're the most athletic, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was truly humbled when Jen Salling joined our team and she was like a freak of nature. I'm like, okay, I'll just go over here to third. And yeah, I really loved it because I feel like it played to my strengths. My footwork wasn't great, but I had like really great reflexes at the time. My footwork has probably gotten better since I played, but yeah, I love playing kind of the game within the game, trying to like bait a slapper to bunt it or vice versa. And I don't know, I had fun doing that, even if people didn't really understand if I was doing it. So lots of fun.
1,000% with you. Loved it. Also the same. Grew up a shortstop, so just sort of had that mentality. But I agree, specifically going up against slappers or just like multidimensional lefties where you never knew if they were going to drop something or they could hit for power too, maybe, let's say. But just that was so fun. It was very fun when like they're trying to trick you or they're trying to pull something and then you throw them out and you're like, and sit down.
Yeah, it was definitely like a pride thing. Like, all right, are you going to win or me? And that was like the little cat and mouse thing that on the outside looking in, I mean, people are paying attention to the pitcher, right? They're not paying attention to us like going up and back and like yelling so they know that we're close or being quiet. So so they can't see you like taking a couple steps back, but super fun.
Well, I've even talked to people like Natasha Watley on the show. I was like, what was more fun, like slapping in the box or like defending against something like that, since she was a shortstop. She's a slapper. She was like, all right, I choose slapping. I was like, okay, fine. She was like, but I did enjoy the other side as well.
And she's one of the best to ever do it. So I'd probably pick slapping if I were her too, because every time she touched it, she's just safe. Like, what's that like?
I'm like, okay, maybe you weren't the best person to ask. Like, you are, but maybe you weren't for my purposes. Yeah. But I also loved playing at UW by the water, like right by the football stadium. I always thought it was really, really cool and really beautiful. And I actually got to go back a couple years ago to call a game. UCLA and UW were playing. And it was just as beautiful as I remembered it. But it's a cool atmosphere there.
It's very it's unique in that you're right by the football stadium, and it's unique that you're right by the lake. So it's just like super picturesque. On a sunny day, it's literally the best place to ever be. On pretty much any other day, which is 80% of Seattle, when it's windy, cold, raining, it's the coldest place on campus. I cannot even joke about it. And when you're pulling the tarp, it's not fun. But um, obviously, I'm really thankful to be part of it and be an alumni. And yeah, I'm excited for this year. I don't have any idea what to expect in this coming season, but I feel like that's kind of all of us now that there's no pack anymore.
Right. Right. Well, and you're bringing back memories with pulling the tarp. I mean, not as we didn't have to do it as much as you all, but the Bay Area has a little more rain than like where I'm from in SoCal, right? So we had to learn that too. But yeah, this year's it's interesting. But I will say they're used to weather to a certain degree, maybe not snow like these other Big Ten teams they'll play against, but
Yeah, I think one of the things that they'll battle mostly is just the actual travel time and
yeah,
the wear and tear on their bodies, and then again, what people don't see when they're watching the games on TV is okay, they have one maybe a few less hours to get their schoolwork done, and we already
right.
know that that's freaking hard to do as a student athlete. So we'll see how
Yeah.
they balance. We'll see how they do it.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Well, across the country too, for multiple conferences, right? Like
Yep.
lots of changes. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, we've actually had Heather Tarr on here, Danielle Laurie, Jen Salling as well. And it's funny because I don't know if you were this way, but I'll talk to people where I'm like, if I played against them, you didn't it wasn't as social when we played. It was like they were the enemy kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm always like so grateful that I have this type of forum to get to know people like them and like you in this way versus, just in the other dugout.
Yeah, I think I admire the current athletes so much in the fact that we all say that the game is different because of social media, because of NIL, because of the transfer portal. Like, there's so many things, and we can rag on it, but it's like truly difficult for them to process all of the things that are going on. And all of them are just like really nice and respectful to each other because it's almost like they never know if they're going to be teammates again or not.
That's true. That's a good
It's
point.
like, hey, I need to be nice to you because you never know if you're going to transfer to my school. I'm just completely making that up. But yeah, I remember being on the field and like just be almost playing angry. Like that was my personality of just like, all right, I don't need to look at the other team, just in my bubble. And I don't see that in today's athlete. The ones, maybe the more like charismatic ones, the ones that like ESPN will focus on and they have these cool stories, they're always smiling and bubbly. And I'm like, dang, that's like some true strength to like focus on the game and like just be able to have fun and go with it. That is some mental toughness, I think,
Yeah.
like disguised.
Oh yeah. Actually, that makes me think of Sis Bates. Speaking of the
Hmm.
Huskies, I feel like that's her, where she plays so hard, but she's always happy. It appears. I guess we don't technically know what's going on in her head, right? But it appears that she's in a good mood a lot of times. I'm like, oh, wish I could have
Yeah,
done
and
that.
that's what's so like alluring about her, right? Everybody knows her for her smile. Everybody is just like, wow, I want to be friends with that girl. Wow, she's awesome. But yeah, we truly don't know what's going on. If that's her playing personality, is that really who she is? And I mean, knowing her, she is that way, which is amazing. But also, that she's struggling with if she's failing, the pressure, expectations, and everybody has a different way of dealing with it.
Right. And you talk a lot about the mental side, or I've seen you call it mental armor. And I know you have resources that you've made, like the real work, which I want to ask you about because you talk about failure recovery. But I
Mhm.
also thought it was interesting that you also talk about failure personality. Like, what is your personality surrounding failure? That's an interesting way to think about it from my view.
Yeah, it's I always loved taking personality tests when I was in college, right? There's so many to choose from. Coach Char had us take, I don't know, one every year. It felt like, and it got us to get to know each other, right? Okay, who are you dealing with? Who are you going to battle with, kind of thing. And my take on it, I've got this whole curriculum inside this real work brand that I kind of created because I wanted something separate than just physical mechanics of softball and
Right.
defense. I wanted to be like, all right, I want to have this conversation, this one that I think is like super important. So I made something special. And yeah, inside of it, like one of the first steps is acknowledging what you're dealing with, right? And acknowledge failure. And then the second one is spot your failure personality. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? And it's really like, I always had a natural reaction to failure. All of us do. All of us like don't want to fail, especially being athletes. Obviously, that's like the opposite of what we want to do. We want to be the best. We want to succeed. We want to win. So a failure personality, I define it as kind of our natural reaction that might not be the healthiest or the fastest to get us back to a competitive mindset.
Hmm.
So I think majority of people are like a combination of the three like big personalities that I define. But I've got escape artist, rage machine, and yes girl. And when I talk about these, people are like, "Oh, I know." Like it's fun, right? To kind of define your friends as these things because we
Yeah.
see it and you can see it in things obviously other than sports. It's just how you react to a situation that is not ideal. So, yeah, definitely one of the first pieces of developing that mental armor or figuring out like who I am under pressure or expectation or challenges or flat out just loss, devastating loss, um, is defining, all right, how am I actually framing this? Well, how am I looking at it? What's the story I'm telling myself?
Right. When I saw the names of the different personalities, the three main ones at least, I felt seen and attacked at the same time. Not in a bad way, but
Yeah,
like
no, they definitely did their job then.
yeah, they cut deep. I was like, "Ooh, that's real. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, ouch.
Yeah, I
Or
can
okay.
relate." Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the personality part, that's the part that was really interesting to me too, because we talk about like you have to recover from failure. Obviously, it's something that we're all going to deal with no matter what, especially in a game of failure like softball, but the personality of like what's your natural reaction, and the way you've defined it as how do you get back to that competitive mindset, that's really key because I think lots of times people might assume like, oh, we should just stay positive all the time, and it's like, okay, but things happen, and then it's like, how do you move on from there? How do you move from that instance? Not like, oh, we'll just pretend like nothing bad's gonna happen, you
Yeah,
know?
be positive, right?
Yeah,
And uh, that'll get you through, I guess, maybe for a little while until you realize, like, no, that's, we need to actually look at this and fix it and tackle it. And I think I use that competitive mindset term because failure feels awful.
yeah,
It doesn't feel good. And as athletes, we need to learn how to perform, how to move through struggle without feeling our best, but
yeah,
knowing like the energy that we put out or knowing that the perspective and the story that we're telling ourselves gets us closer to being competitive,
yeah,
right? So, like we use the example of Sis Bates. Her competitive mindset is probably she's needs to be in that smiley, bubbly, talkative, right?
yeah,
Like that's kind of how we see her. That's how we have seen her playing great. Maybe she disagrees, but this is just on the surface, right? We're just being
right,
very much like as the observer. For me, I feel like I was in the middle. I always thought when I played a little bit angry that that was my zone. I needed to be there. But in reality, when I look at my best performance, I was kind of like a little bit removed from
mm,
like being 100% focused on the little details, right? I was
mm,
kind of more, oh, okay, let's focus on the ball instead of all of the little things going on and everything
yeah,
around me. So that's the reason why I use personalities is mindset is very individual when you
yeah,
think about it, right?
hmm,
Everybody's got their different way of getting in their zone. Yes, there are true tried and true tactics to like figuring that out and funneling in. but you got to figure it out. And that's kind of the scary part for a lot of youth athletes is they're like, okay, how do I do it though? There's so many different ways. And that's what's the beautiful part about it. And as you grow and you get older, you kind of see that is like, oh, there wasn't one answer.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of these answers that it's scary because there's a lot of unknowns in each of them.
Yeah.
But we have to walk through different doors to kind of figure out which one fits.
That's very true. I can relate to what you're describing as your personality too. I was very serious.
Yeah.
And I think when I did better, it was when I was a little bit less serious. And not to say you're not focused at all or you're goofing off. Obviously not. But just less tense, you know? And that's something that I didn't really understand till later. And I remember interviewing, she's since graduated, but Taylor Ginnelsberger was playing for Stanford a couple years ago. And I was interviewing her and asking her about her walk-up song. We weren't allowed to have walk-up songs when I played, but we all knew what it would be like if we chose one. We were like, oh, I like that one. And she actually said, she's like, I know a lot of people do like pump-up songs and things like that, but I actually try to do a song that like relaxes me and keeps me calm. And I was like, that is so interesting because I had always thought of it as like kind of like you're saying, it doesn't have to be angry music because like we don't have to be like death metal every time. Yeah. But like, you know, like something with energy. But like her energy, she was like, what I needed was for me to actually get more balanced and centered. And so that's why I would choose that type of walk-up song. I was like, I had not thought of it that way. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think to me, I just didn't put enough time into understanding what I needed. I knew what felt comfortable for me. And what felt comfortable for me was like really having control and really holding on and really being focused and really being serious. When probably what I needed was like to smile more and just relax.
Yeah.
And I think that's what like a lot of parents want their kids to do. And it seems so like, I remember my mom telling me these things, right?
Right.
Hey, why you smile? And it's like, ew, why? Or, you know, or like it to the point where it's almost offensive. Like, you don't understand how much this means to me though. Like
right.
this is like me. And our parents just want us to see like, no, you're a lot more than this.
Right.
You don't even have to do this. You are you and you're powerful and you're amazing. But we don't want to hear that when we're 13 years old.
Right.
We're just like, no, you literally don't get it.
Yeah.
So that's what's tough now because I feel like we are of the age, like in our 30s, where I'm probably sounding more like a mom to a lot of these kids, which is terrifying, but also like I'm just embracing it because mom was right. Mom was freaking right. And it's like painful to say it over and over and over again. But like life is not softball, even though it's important and we identify with all the things about it and it means so much. But when we hold on something so tightly, we don't understand like or we can't see all the things that are around that are so beautiful, and we're not able to relax and let the magic of what we're doing and being just be.
Literally, this is what I wish we had this conversation. Maybe not when we were playing against each other, but like in between, you know, back
like
in college.
Before we got to college, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Hey, we're high school seniors. We think we're badass because we're committed to these colleges, and like right before. What's your audience right now? Because I just want to not cuss or say things that are like...
it's mixed. Go for it. Be yourself.
Perfect. So right before our buttholes get like really tight from being like freshmen on campus, we're like the shit, right? Yeah. We're everything. We're wearing our Washington sweatshirts around that we got when we went on our recruiting visit, and we're like everything. So if I had this talk with somebody just like, hey, in a couple months, you're going to feel very different. You're going to go from being big fish to like feeling like you're this big. Yeah. So let's figure this out. How are you going to handle this?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to catch pretty much this book is aimed at high schoolers. The real work isn't just like a website. I wrote a book with all these
Yep.
stories, and I think it's pretty good, but also I think they're just my stories. So part of it feels like very therapeutic to write a book like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think in my experience of posting on social media, being like vulnerable in those times when you feel like, oh my God, if people knew who I was when I played, maybe they wouldn't go to my lessons. If people knew this, and I kind of leaned into that because, in fact, people want to hear that about you, to see like the transformation of, oh, well, if she was that, then maybe I could be where I could get what she got.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop talking. This is where I ramble.
No, no, this to me, I'm like, tell me more because it's, I think we have a lot in common. Let me just say it that way. At least the way that we've thought about things then and maybe just evolving since also, because this is part of the reason why I'm excited to read your book as well, is because there are stories. It's so easy for us to share these platitudes and like generalizations and these things, but so many of us, we want to know the how and like the hard and the details and the grit and stuff and like what actually happens, through these things.
Mhm.
And so to have stories to actually see it play out makes the difference, I think, at least.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but social media and just the amount of information that we're getting every day is overwhelming. So I wanted to put something out that was just like, okay, even the very complicated and almost heavy uh, like idea of the mental and emotional part of sports, I
Yeah.
want to simplify it as best as I can. And I don't know, I even find it hard to get through a book. Like I'll put it on Audible, which is like my next uh, project, is to try to read through it and not stumble over my words, because I'm not a very good popcorn reader out loud.
I'm
Um,
excited for that, though. That's great.
yeah, because I mean, it's how I would listen to this type of book, honestly. So I'm going to try to do that. That's kind of what I try to do in all my things. Like, how would I actually interact with this?
Right.
And some of the stuff that I've put out in the past, I'm like, dang, I wouldn't use that. It's got like a little complicated. So I'm really
Mm,
trying to get back to what would actually be helpful. And I thought stories was the best way.
yeah. I've also seen you say that there isn't a secret formula. There's not one
Mm,
secret formula to success. And to share stories, I feel like is more authentic to that because it's,
yeah.
or else it's like, here's the cheat code. Here's everything. Here's the framework that you do. And like, everything's going to be okay. And that's not realistic either.
Yeah, in the book I share, and this is all free information on the website too, so you don't even have to buy the book to understand like what my actual curriculum is, what I'm asking people to do. It's ASAP training. It's acknowledge your failure, spot your personality, um, adjust your actual reaction, and then practice every day.
Hmm.
I created that framework actually from my softball lessons, because part of lessons, if you guys, people listening to this, have ever coached youth sports, majority of the lesson is us like trying to figure out how we're going to communicate to this individual, because we know they react to failure in this way.
Yeah.
So yes, we've got a standard for like, hey, if you do this, here's the consequence. But also, there's so many different personalities that we deal with. And majority of the time, we're dealing with what's holding the kids back mentally versus them not actually being able to perform a physical skill. It's
Hmm.
like, no, she's not listening to the adjustment because she's scared of being judged by the people in her group. So
Yeah.
this is kind of what gave me the idea. And yeah, I think it's helpful in terms of just how the stories will intertwine. Um, I use them more as examples of kind of where I was, how certain mental traits apply, and it's definitely not a mental game book. I want to make that like
Hmm.
clarification, because there's so many mental performance coaches, and I'm not certified as a mental performance coach. I majored in psychology, but that a major is just like telling you exactly all the things that you don't know. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, just by the way, this stuff exists. You don't know about it yet, but
Yeah.
you got a
It's true.
degree.
It's true.
Um, so this book is more to talk about the fact that, like you said, there isn't one answer. Because like as a softball coach, I get the question all the time. Okay, my job, I'm pointing out, hey, let's make this adjustment. Your shoulder's flying out. Like, let's do this drill, blah, blah. Then at the end of the class, this literally happened last night. End of the class, same kid comes up, hey, Coach Morgan, what drill can I do to fix that? Okay. One, we just went over a ton of things that you could have done, but you didn't like those for some reason. Two, there's not one drill to do to fix this.
Right.
It's over and over practicing the correct way that you want to behave, the correct mechanic, over and over and over until it is habit.
Yeah.
And how many reps is that? Somebody said something like 10,000 hours of
Yeah.
reps. So it's like, that's something I'm not going to tell the kid right then because it's like a 9-year-old. So I'm
Right.
like, hey, remember all the drills that we did focusing on our hip turning, but our shoulders not turning? Yeah. How many drills do you think you have? I don't know, at least 2. I'm like, okay, there's like 12, but sure, let's go with 2. And you got to practice those at home. Do you remember how to do that? Yes. Okay. Simple answer, done. But that's what most people want for everything. Everybody wants the answer, the answer, the answer. Guess what? There's not the answer. Most of the time the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
It depends. And this is an answer that has come up so often in like softball training where people email in, hey coach, where does my daughter throw the ball if this happens? It's like, okay, where's the runner? What's the speed of the ball? What's your daughter's strengths? Does she have a
Right.
strong arm? Blah, blah, blah. Where's everybody else playing? So my answer could literally just be, it depends. Shoot the email back. But the same thing applies to mental training too, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get better at a certain skill, there's not one thing that you got to do. There's a lot of options, and it depends the path that you want to go down. So yeah, my book is organized into ASAP training. So all of those 4 steps.
Yep.
For each of those 4 steps, I've got 3 mental skills that are associated with like each step, right? Like skills like building patience, responsibility. We've got drive and fire, right? Like these things that we know that all successful athletes, people, humans have. But nobody's really talking about those traits anymore. Everybody only hears about accomplishments. Everybody only sees on TV like the people that have figured it out, which in reality they don't have it figured out. They just had it figured out when they were on TV.
Yeah.
So,
Right. 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 That's, man, again, it's all, I'm taking mental notes as well as obviously this. Thank goodness this is recorded because I'm going to reference back to this later on because it's so true. And now that you're talking through it in more detail, it's clicking with me that, yes, we talked about everybody wants the easy answer or here's the one thing I can do, but the real work is actually figuring out all of what all actually goes into it. And it's not the same for everybody. So that is work to figure that out for yourself. And then if you are helping others like you are, like helping figure it out for them as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, both of us are still doing the real work every single day, right?
Yeah.
My patience is tested every day. But just in terms of the book, this was a really, really important one for me to write about because I write about it in terms of each of these players needs to understand that these skills take time to develop. Like you being the person who you want to become, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. Uh, so giving yourself grace and just going, hey, we're okay.
Yeah.
And that's not the same as going, I don't have to do that, and lowering your expectations. It's a much different game when you understand I'm running a marathon, I'm not running a sprint.
Yeah.
So let's give yourself some time.
Yeah.
So that's like hugely important, just because I think, especially in social media times, everybody is seeing these 12-year-olds already know how to do their makeup, already know all the dance moves, already know everything.
Yeah.
When, let's just face it, these 12-year-olds live on social media and they know how to do their makeup because they're putting in the hours and the reps and the work.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The
Great.
10,000
They're good at it
hours.
because you got the reps, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of other things that we just haven't gotten the reps for, and that's okay.
Right. This is making me remember sort of when it finally clicked for me the difference between simple and easy.
Mm,
The idea that something's easy is like, oh, it doesn't take that much effort, whatever. And you want things to be easy in theory, but you can simplify like you're doing with the work that you do and with the real work. That just makes it's simpler, but simple things aren't easy. Just because something's simple doesn't mean it's an easy thing to do.
oh
Oh, well, let me
gosh.
just figure out what works for me. That's simple. It's a simple concept. Okay, but that's not an easy thing to do. So
Yeah.
that's coming up for me as well with us in this conversation.
Absolutely. You think about anything, right? Like lifting weights. Okay, lift that weight up. Simple. That's the hardest thing I've ever done in my
Yeah,
life.
exactly.
Right? Uh, yeah, another thought that I had too is the difference between challenging and hard. I heard
Mm.
this brought up by, gosh, I I don't want to even give away who it was because it was part of like another training. Anyways, the difference between challenging and hard, I think, is the difference between us as athletes building these skills in kind of a vacuum, which we're going to call
Mm.
sports. We're
Right.
building these skills, and this is a really safe, more or less, place to fail. And I think uh, where it gets scary is when we make that unsafe for ourselves to fail. And I'll go
Right.
into like all these things, but essentially, as they are made, sports is a very safe place to fail. You strike out, you're not hurt, you're just gonna go sit down on the bench, right?
Right. Right.
So, safe place to fail. And there's challenging things in sport. There's dealing with a strikeout. There's actually getting out there and facing the toughest pitcher that you know. That's challenging, to be
Yeah.
prepared, to have your breath in order. It's challenging. But what we're trying to do in sports is create these skills to deal with challenges so that in real life, we're actually dealing with hard. And hard is a different category in itself. Hard
Yeah.
is real life stuff. That's Hard is dealing with the loss of a loved one. Hard is moving to a place that you've never been before and you have the option to isolate yourself or figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So the difference between challenging and hard, I think about all the time, because there's like so many layers to athletes growing up in sport. And I think we get caught in how challenging it can be, right? And
Mm.
there's not really, and depending on like who you are and just genetically who you're predispositioned to be. I'm predispositioned to be anxious, more introverted, uh, a perfectionist, right? So all these things can potentially make sport a very unsafe and unhealthy place
Mm.
for me to fail.
Right.
But that's also up to me. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, I, I'm not going to play softball because, or I'm not going to be an athlete because I've got a really big risk of developing depression from
Mm.
failing too much. But mm, yeah, or we could continue to practice in this sport as a vehicle for growth and work through it, because no matter what, I'm always going to have that risk of developing depression or anxiety as an adult.
Yeah.
But now I've got some experience. I've been building my confidence in being able
Mm.
to figure it out because I've done it
Yes.
before now.
Yes. Again, this just keeps resonating with me over and over. I'm just like, oh, yeah, man. I wish this was earlier in life. That's why I'm glad that you're able to provide some of this for young girls earlier in life for this. Because even you're talking about certain things that we're feeling, right? I didn't identify some of the things I felt in college. I didn't understand that it was anxiety.
Mm.
That came later, right? So even being able to understand some of those things is helpful. So then when Inside Out 2 came out and like anxiety comes into the
Like,
picture,
oh my gosh.
I'm like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. But just understanding that piece, that's the part that it's hard until it clicks. It's like you don't get it till you get it. So the earlier you can do it, to your point, and at least have those conversations, the better.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult because everybody has feelings. Everybody does. It's not it is not no one's spared. Everybody has like millions of thoughts going through their head all the time. And it's just a matter of some people are better at tuning things out. Some people don't have really super vicious self-talk.
Yeah, must be
And
nice.
right? Um, but I think putting language to what you're feeling is super helpful, and just trying to like that's why journaling is a great tool
Yeah,
and something that I definitely as a kid shied away from because I'm like, this sounds stupid as I'm writing it. Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Yes,
Why are you going to be so mean to yourself right now?
right.
Write it out. Write
Yes.
out your actual self-talk because that's the true self-discovery is like, oh, I didn't before you write it out, it's like embarrassing when you read it back, you're like, this is what I'm beating
Whoa.
myself
Right.
over and over again. That's terrible. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
For me too, and I did journal. Like writing always helped. I always felt lighter afterwards because it's like you write it out, you do kind of it's kind of a mirror for you a little bit. It kind of lands with you like what you're actually saying to yourself. But then I feel like I got it out too. So I'm like, okay, it's out. Not that it's magic, but it would help not hold on to it as much for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, I love writing. I just know that my self-talk was something that I didn't even want to put down. And so
Mm.
it's like embarrassing to read it back. And I think I did that a couple times and I looked back probably a month after I wrote it and just went, oh, like I should probably get somebody to help me with this because this isn't going very well. So I've done that, like I think I write from the perspective of somebody that is very hard on themselves, that is like just overly self-critical. I'm pretty smart, so I can see the different perspectives. And that's one thing that I will say is smart athletes aren't always the best performing because we can see all sides. We know who's watching us. We know the implications of one at bat, and we can do the math really quick in our head. And we're like, okay, what's the point? What's
Yeah.
the point of even going in there? So I don't know. Like from my perspective, I have sought therapy. I've gone through the different things, and I've tried so many ways to grow myself. And my overarching message to anybody struggling, anybody looking to learn more about their mentality and just how they experience life through their eyes is be patient. Be
Yeah.
patient with yourself. There's so much that you don't know yet. I mean, the world is just limitless if you
Yeah.
really think about this. All this information. There's so many experiences that are going to teach you more about yourself than you even know. Um, and no matter how alone that you feel, you are just not. Whether you have great relationships with your parents, family, coaches, teammates, no matter what, there are people that want to see the best for you. And even if you haven't met them yet. It's the weirdest thing. Like that's the hardest part about struggling in sport is we all think that we're the only ones. And we're
Yeah.
just really not.
Yep. Yep. And then that leads to isolation, which you're just more spiraling by yourself instead of leaning on others. But you said it, patience, again, simple, not easy.
Yeah, patience. That's probably my worst trait. It's my worst trait.
Well, but I'm agreed for myself but I think we're similar in the sense like when you overanalyze and it's hard to be patient. It's even harder in that regard because you're like, well, I've thought through everything and I know all the things that can happen and I'm thinking about this and that. And you're like, but I have to wait to actually see certain things to fruition. And you're like moving ahead mentally of where you actually are. So that's why the like be where your feet are thing is so important as well.
Yeah. It's very difficult to have so many thoughts, and
Yeah.
you got to work through it. One of the tactics that I have used in the past is just thought replacement. Instead of telling myself, all right, shut up, I can't stop thinking, you're like, all right, I'm literally only going to focus on my breath. Okay. I'm going to focus on my breath and I'm going to focus on the ball. And that's it. That's all I'm allowed to do right now. If I
Yeah.
have other thoughts, just bring them back. And that gets you back to meditation, which is absolutely very difficult.
Yeah.
So um, there's just so many things to try. And I think there's when athletes are at a point when they're struggling and they don't know what to do, the hardest thing for anybody to like approach with is like, hey, it's okay, you're gonna figure it out. Because athletes are just like, but how? They're
Yeah.
all like hands up girls, right? Everybody feels helpless. Everybody feels like they've exhausted everything, but you haven't. You
Yeah.
just haven't done the simple but very challenging things that you can do.
Yeah.
Journaling, mind, like practicing actual like getting centered and breathing. Like there's so much science behind breathing. It's insane.
It's crazy. You're right. Yes. You're like, I thought that that was one thing I was good at. Apparently, I
Yeah,
need
I
to
thought I
be.
was surviving, right? I have to get oxygen into my body. So,
Yeah. That's funny. We're thinking about all these things too, but I know that you funnel a lot of this into defense as
mm.
well. And I'm a defense girl too. Loved it. Obviously, we talked about third base and how fun it was to play over there in college. But what about defense just clicks for you the most?
Probably that. I mean, number one, I loved it. It was my safe spot
Yeah.
compared to hitting. Growing up, I was told that I would never play Division One based on how I sucked at hitting. Like I literally told that. And that's why I'm so into like positive reinforcement, constructive criticism as a coach. And to some extent, yeah, you can look at it as motivating, but that's super like when you're 12, 13, hearing about I'll never play Division 1. What? Like I hear that
Right.
story back in my head and I'm like, why would anybody tell me that? And two, that's like an identity piece that I just, because of how I am and I'm over analytical, I'm like, oh, this is me. Nobody else wanted to tell me this, but this guy's telling me the truth. This is my truth.
Mm,
And then I held on to that for a long time. So defense was like my safe spot. I would dive. I would love practice. Loved it. Because even if I made a mistake, like I'm going all out. And it was so
yeah.
fun. And that's how I want people to associate softball and getting better. And with actual defense, if you really break it down, the skills are way easier than hitting, like and pitching, right? Like if I'm gonna build somebody's confidence, if I'm really into like that piece, I'm going to pick simple skills and have them skyrocket. Like, hey,
Mm,
it's really not that hard to see the ball into your glove. We're going to teach you to catch. We're going to teach you posture. We're going to teach you right, left field, right, left throw. And
mm,
in like 2, 3 lessons, this girl that was like a beginner is now teaching the other beginners all the cool drills that she knows. And it's just a really cool thing to see.
yeah.
Um, yeah, there's so many things that I love about defense. I could go on and on. Just you're not in the spotlight. and the work that you do to get ready for the maybe one ball a game that you're going to get is everything. Like, to me, that's another version of like the real work. Like, you have to be ready
Yeah.
every single pitch, but you're not really going to be in the spotlight. You're not the hitter that's in the box that everybody's watching, but you still have to be
Right.
ready.
Right. Doing all that work, and you might make two plays, maybe a little more in the infield than the outfield, right? But
Yeah.
still,
Or no plays.
or
But
yeah, yeah,
everyone's going to know if you made a mistake, though.
yeah. Well, and that's why we think about it. If you like a batting average, for example, we always say if you could fail 7 out of 10 times and you're successful, so you could be in that 300 range, and that's solid. But if you think about it with fielding, we're all looking at that 900 range, obviously. So it's more of a like, if you make a mistake, people know it. Like you're saying, it's just a different kind of
Well,
mindset
yeah,
or
defense definitely is, to me, easier, right? Like, the
yeah.
numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's awesome. My favorite part.
Yeah. How I have to ask you this too, since we played at the same time. How do you view the way that they score games today, like a hit versus an error? I have thoughts, so I would like to hear your thoughts.
I'm going to be brutally honest right now. I have no idea how they score them, because I will catch I will catch very little games during the season. Like, I'll turn it on, especially because I like Amanda Scarborough is one of my best friends, so she'll commentate. So I'm more like listening.
Yeah.
But what's going on? Are there like less errors, more hits? What's going on?
Yeah. Like there's certain things that, if it hits the middle of your glove and it comes out and they're like, well, it was hit hard. It would have been an error kind of in our day, but they give it a hit now, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it hits the glove and bounces off. That's an error. Like, doesn't
Yeah.
matter how hard it's hit. What are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a feeling you'd be aligned with my thoughts on it.
Well,
But
plus, I'm sure the pitchers are upset, because that's like, if those runs score, that's an earned run and not like not,
right.
right.
Yeah. But I think that's partly why, not the only reason, there's plenty of other reasons in terms of like education, even technology, things like that. But part of the reason we see more inflated batting averages now than I think we did back then. But again, the game changes over time. It always does. It's going to continue to.
Right. Plus, I'm wondering if there's some strategy to like viewership, and just,
Mm,
okay, whoa, this team had their average is 400. Wow, I want to watch them play because they're going to be hitting.
yeah.
Versus, oh, this team is batting 240, which is like more
Right.
normal. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. It's a good point. I think when it comes to what you're saying with your audience as well, though, that younger audience, I think of like you won a CIF title in high school. You
mhm.
played for the Batbusters. You played for Marty Tyson. Tori's been on the show too, and so we got some great stories. Speaking of stories, some great stories out of her. But I think for your experience, and you obviously go into some stories in your book and just in all of the work that you do. But what do you think was the most critical thing for you at that time that got you at least to continue on to the path that you ended up taking?
During the time of like travel ball,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, if I had to pick one thing that happened, this is like in the depths of my memory. My memory isn't great, but um, so I played for a travel organization, Miners Gold, in 14 and under,
I
and
remember Miner's Gold. Okay.
yes,
Yep.
yes. And going from that team to make my next choice back when we were playing, it's like, okay, team, you can go from 14 under to 18 gold, and those are like the girls, right?
Yeah.
And I viewed myself as that, but also a lot of my like friends were going to the 16 under Batbuster team. And I had two in-home visits from travel ball coaches, Doug Myers and Marty Tyson. It was like, what is this world that I'm in? Like, I'm getting recruited as like a travel ball player. And Doug came to the house first. Loved Doug, super sweet. And he's like, we're going to win the 16 under national championship. We're just going to do it. Like, all these players are coming, would love to have you. You're going to be the starting shortstop, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, cool, I'm in. Marty came after, and we had told him, like, we're pretty much already committed over here, but you can still come if you want. And Marty just like blew us away. And he's like, I don't care that you already committed there. I'm gonna make you a force as a hitter. And that's something, like, me being told before this that I would never be a D1 hitter. I'm like, I need to play for this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my road of travel ball, like, I did play on that 16 under Batbuster team. We did win a national championship. Those were some of my best friends I'll ever have, and I still speak to. And Marty took me on as a hitter, even though I was a Batbuster. Like, I was in his backyard for that whole season, just learning the ways and learning to be better. And he just did that because, one, he wanted me on his team, and I knew that. But there was this, like, unshakable belief, and it was probably like an amount of pride inside of Marty, just going, I can make anybody a great hitter, right? So it meant so much to me, and I have so many Marty stories of, like, different instances where he shows, like, that belief. And I know everybody has these stories about Marty just because that's how he is. He truly, like, believes that he is one of the greatest coaches, but also that's the reason why a lot of his players, like, even though he's loud and obnoxious on the field, his players would go to battle for him because he believes in them. So it's very, it's definitely something that I needed as a kid, is somebody besides my parents going, yeah, I want you. I need you to come and hit with me. And you're my shortstop. Like, those are, you can't tell a kid, or you can't give a kid any other experience besides that, and that'll keep me going until college, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. And now you get to be that person for young girls at times. Like, if you're giving lessons and things, like, you can help build that belief in themselves.
Yeah, no, I try really hard. There's a very special place for travel ball coaches in heaven. Because I could not do it. I think they are insane, the amount of hours that they spend, and it's like a thankless job, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of stories of people being on, like, a Marty's team, getting a scholarship, and then going and playing for somebody else, and it's like, whoa, dude, that's like harsh. But, like, yeah, I try my hardest to instill a lot of the things that I talk about and the things that I believe with my kids. I also only get an hour a week with them.
Right.
And it's difficult. So that's why I am thankful for, like, the online platform. I'm thankful for podcasts like this. But yeah, I'm also very thankful from where I came from. Like, even spending a year with Doug Myers, like, that year is one of my favorites I've ever played in travel ball because it was freaking fun. We were good. Who doesn't like winning?
Oh, 100%. Winning is fun.
Yeah.
But I know we've touched on some of the things you do, right? It's much more than just instruction, and you have the resources and a book, even with the real work and all those things. But can you break down everything under your umbrella so people can get involved and reach out to you?
Yes, it's also growing. So I'm just gonna describe currently, and then hopefully I don't ramble too far. So my bread and butter, I will say, is defense lessons. I'm in Anaheim, California, and that is Monday through Thursday. I'm in there 2 times a week. I've kind of tapered back, and now, like, it is my mission to provide a better lesson coaching experience if you don't want to, like, start your own business, right? Because that's only for so many of us that coach lessons.
Right.
So Amanda Fama's in there, and she's there every single night. She is outstanding. I've also got a whole team of lesson coaches, and there's, like, about 8 of us that run lessons, and we're consistent. We're in there. We coach ages 8 to about 17 in there. And they're all broken up by age and ability. Ugh, it's a monster. It's a monster in there. So I also have an online platform called Defense Club,
Yeah.
which is mostly, I think, the most beneficial to softball coaches. It's got all my drills. I've got courses in there, and I'm going to be coming out with more for that. And it's like pennies on the dollar for all the stuff that's in there. It's $20 a month. And it's got everything I've ever created. And I've been doing this for 10 years. So there's a lot.
Yeah.
And as you can see, I talk a lot about defense. So there's a lot.
Of course.
Um, then the real work is a book. You can buy it on my website. There's also like correlating workbooks and notebooks. And I think that those are really beneficial if you're like a coach that wants to do some exercise with his or your team. Those are cool. And then there's lots more on the horizon, but I'm just trying to figure out how to fit it all into a day,
Oh,
just
I'm
like all of
sure.
us.
Yeah. Which is it's a positive problem to have. It's challenging, not hard, let's say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It is challenging. And I constantly am thinking there's way bigger business people than me. This is softball. I can figure this out. I don't have to feel busy all the time. I'm going to figure
Yeah.
this out. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, and how you reach people, not just the in person piece, but over social media too. I mean, a lot of Instagram followers, YouTube subscribers. How can people find you there?
Yes. That takes up a lot of time, and I don't even talk about that. So
Yeah.
uh, probably people's favorite to follow me is for the defensive drills. That's on Instagram is my favorite platform to create on. So defense lessons is what that's called. I will talk about my story and mostly the real work on Morgan Stewart 18 on Instagram.
Hmm.
Trying to get better at YouTube, but man, I'm just there's social media is a time suck. It's just
It's a beast. It is. Yeah.
so I try
It's a
my
lot.
best, but yeah.
Well,
Other
that's
than
why.
Instagram, it's hard.
Right. But the fact that you have, even with just some of your different offerings, so much that's all there, that's why that's so important too, is because there's so much information that comes at everybody. It's like nice to have, like, okay, I know I can go to Morgan, I can see all of these types of things, you know?
You can see pretty much everything that I'm doing and everything that I want you to see on those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to wrap up, I play a game with everybody that comes on the show. It's called Safe or Out. So you're the umpire. I'm going to bring up a topic. If you like it, you agree with it, you call it safe. If
Okay.
not, then you call it out.
Okay.
Okay. So the first one is, let me see if I can phrase this the way I'm wanting to. Performance awards. So, regional, conference, All American, all those things. Being based on offense, but not taking into account defense more.
This is so hard for
I
me to
know.
say safe because I'm a defense coach, but it's just like the reality is if you don't hit, you're not going to play.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you're a liability on defense, you're not going to play
Right.
to some extent. So I'm just going to say safe and hopefully that's okay.
Well, I think for me, it's only when someone could have like outstanding astronomical hitting numbers, but if their fielding numbers are like kind of atrocious, then I'm like, I feel like that needs to be a factor at some point. But for it to lead with hitting, I mean, yeah, of course it makes sense.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts,
I can see him swirling around a little
but I'm just going to go
bit.
with safe.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. The second one is transfer portal. Safer out.
I'm going to say out. I'm going to
Mm,
say out. I don't think it's a super necessity. I feel like I understand it, and we need to better prepare the kids to make a good choice going in. And
that's a
that's
good
very
point.
difficult as well.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. Once you introduce the transfer portal and NIL, and then we don't even recognize our sport anymore.
Yeah, it's
So,
change has been the name of the game.
which we
Yeah,
understand why
yeah.
things need to change and grow, but I'll just say out.
It's a good point, though, that how can we be better at matching kids with the programs? Like, how can we be better at making that the right choice? Or,
Well, what's
you
difficult
know,
too is there's so many factors, right? It's like I th- I think one thing is maybe going, you know what? Transfer portal safe, multiple transfers out. Like,
mm, hmm
and you're going to, because you see people transferring twice and or three times, and you're like, what are, okay,
right,
that's a personal issue. Like, I understand
right,
the first one, but like, why three?
right.
Why? Because now
Yeah,
I think we're just abusing the system at that point.
yeah, yeah. I understand that. I think I agree. All right, and the last one is bat flips, safer out.
I am always of the notion like if you want to get your bat flipped, you're gonna have to expect getting hit your next at bat or your teammate getting hit in the next pitch. So if you are in on that and you're in to play hardball like that, then safe. But if you're gonna then throw a fit when that happens, out.
Right, right. Spoken like someone who definitely played with Danielle Laurie.
Yeah. Because
That was like
Danielle will go after you. And
that
I'm
was like
like,
the first
well,
thing she said. Yeah, she was like, expect one in the ribs. That's all.
yeah,
I was like, okay.
yeah, it's not a big deal. You're just gonna your teammate's gonna get hit or you're gonna get hit the next time. Go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That's hilarious. Well, thank you, Morgan. This was super fun. I learned a lot, which is part of one of my favorite things really about doing this. Of course, it's for the audience and for our softball community, but I get a lot out of it too. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. I was happy to talk your ear off, I guess. A lot to say.
Literally what this is for, right? So it's perfect. It was fun to have Morgan on the show for many reasons. Of course, including the fact that she's a fellow defense connoisseur. But also, when we were playing third base at the same time in our conference series against each other back in the day, never would I have guessed back then that we'd be doing something like this here now. And that's one of the fun things, the full circle moments that we have in softball and in sport in general. She's doing a lot for the sport too, so I hope you appreciated learning from her, and let's just keep an eye on everything that she's doing. So, with that, let's bring it home. You've been listening to Bleav in Softball, part of Bleav Network and presented by Bet Online. The show is available anywhere you get your podcasts, wherever you listen, including Bleav.com and YouTube too. Subscribe to the show, rate the show, and if you liked it, write a review. Follow us on X and Instagram at Bleav in Softball. Again, that's BLEAV. You can reach out to me personally on X at Jenna Becerra01 and Instagram at Jenna Becerra as well. As always, thank you for tuning in and catch you soon.